So in the never-ending winter of UK lockdown, I decided to put my skills to good use and just to pass the time to make a 1949 original Vogue design coat. And this is the story of how I made it. Enjoy. So how these patterns work, if anyone who's never seen one before, it's basically like a massive puzzle that you put together, and so this one I think had about 14 pieces all together, and you cut them out along the specific guidelines to your size, and then there's a sizing chart on the back of the packet that it comes in. What I would say is, again, like clothes you would buy off the rack, these are standard sizing, so you can make alterations as you go along, but you also have to remember that any small thing you change, you have to change also the thing that's connected to it and the thing that's connected to that. So just be aware that it's not as simple to change things. And if you are proportioned differently to standard sizing, I would suggest making this up in calico or making a toile, like a mock-up version, before going ahead with the final version. And there we have it. We lay it out on all the fabric and cut it out. And there we have the nice scissor chopping sound. So you basically chop all your pieces out in the correct. They tell you on the pattern pieces if this is the wool fabric, if this is the canvas pieces, or if this is the lining pieces, and it really is that simple, to be honest. Sometimes working with bulky fabrics or just a long meterage of fabrics can be quite disconcerting if you're used to just doing small sewing projects, but to be honest, just jump in. And it was a nice welcome break from the rain and the autumn weather. I should say I started this at the end of November, and my ceiling leaked, but there we go. Carried on. So these are the little flappy pockets that you can see. I'll insert a picture here that you can see on the front of the coat. And now I had a bad relationships with these pockets in the end, because they tell you to line them with canvas, which makes them, if your coat's made of wool anyway, which made them way too thick, and wasn't the best idea. In the end, I ended up taking this canvas layer out because you have to sew them into a seam, and it ended up a layer of wool, another layer of wool, a layer of canvas, another layer of wool, and another layer of wool. And as you can imagine, that seems so bulky that it wasn't looking great at all. So in the end, I did take this out, but I thought I'd just show the process in case you decide to use thinner fabric, or just as a useful process for coat making. So I tack the canvas to the top layer, and I'm just mitering the edges, so all of the edges are at different levels, so that when I turn this pocket out, all of the seam allowances aren't sat in one thick line. And more pictures of the beautiful coastline. That kept me sane too, in between it all, going for walks when we had those bright, crisp autumn days. And so there's a few processes. I filmed the more minutiae processes, including making a buttonhole and trying to film that with one hand wasn't my best idea, whipping out those scissors there. But again, you don't need a buttonhole machine. You don't even need to use a buttonhole stitch on your sewing machine. You literally sew a box and poke the facing through the other side. So this is where we get on to some of that finer detail that I was talking about that will make the coat stand apart from a off the rack coat. So here I'm pad stitching the canvas into the lapel. If you remember on the design, I'll insert a picture here. They had these huge lapels that actually in real life, when I finally made it, looked a bit weird, but they had these huge lapels, and so in order to get your canvas to sit correctly on those lapels and give them some structure, you pad stitch the canvas to the wool, and I'll put a really good detailed description on this process in the description box below by I think it was one of Bernadette Banner's videos. She's well worth watching. Doing a horizontal tiny stitch, picking up a tiny amount of wool, and then basically moving down, and it creates a sort of this diagonal stitch. Yeah, and so as you can see as I'm flipping it back, you can't really see it, or you shouldn't see it if it's done well enough, and then it gives it that roll. And once that's done, you cut the seam allowance off and you use a small amount of cotton tape and sew that cotton tape to the edge of the canvas and the edge of the wool. I'll put another video detailing that because I forgot to film it, but you can just see the roll that I was trying to get. I decided not to have like flipping up collar as seen in the on the left here, and these are 2 progress photos. As you can see, it was super long, and the pockets are in there, and the lapel has just been pad stitched back, and I think it was quite a nice cut. It was fitting well enough. To be honest, looking at that picture now, I think it's quite obvious the waist could have been moved up an inch. And I trundled along through the long nights, and it gave me something to do. Time-wise, I started toward the end of November, and I finished on Christmas Eve. And I was doing it about 3 evenings a week, just because I had nothing else to do in the evening anymore, and no one else did, so this is the hem, and as I mentioned before, it was way too long. And so this is me tacking, just so I can see it whilst I'm trying it on, and I can pin it up and I have some idea where it's going to sit. It's difficult when it's that long, especially if you're just trying to fold it up in the mirror with you've got a mass of fabric and you're trying to work out where it's going to actually hang. So tacking a line, always a good way to know what you're looking at. This was the finished coat, and my ceiling had been fixed by this point, so it wasn't about to get dripped on, don't worry. There was a few things I'd change about this pattern. You can just slightly see there at the back. There's slightly too much fabric along the centre back that never quite sat right, doesn't quite sit right. So I would slightly change that now. And I found some old buttons. These are just random buttons lying around because I didn't really think you could buy 3 buttons online, or unless I'd pay like an extortionate amount. And there we have it. I did it. I finished it. It didn't become one of the half-finished projects that I have set around that I'm always intending to get back to. And I can wear it And it's really warm, to be honest. There's a lot of fabric in there. Yeah, thanks for watching.